Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Solid topic? Let's do it. What's an urban legend that turned out to be true? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. The rogue waves. For centuries, sailors talked about encountering sudden single waves that were described to reach 100 feet high. Nobody believed them because everyone assumed these waves were just another one of the stories sailors on leave would make up to impress pubgoers. As the 20th century came along, oceanographic research became more formalized and advanced, yet no researcher was able to record hard data on these waves apart from just writing down their own experience getting hit by one. An anecdote isn't really something you can publish. In the 1980s, the Dropner gas field was discovered in the North Sea, and a new type of oil platform was set up there. To assess the integrity of the new design, the platform was installed with sensors not normally present on other platforms, one of which was a wave height recorder. It was only in 1995 that those sensors recorded a single 80-foot wave hitting the platform, and rogue waves were finally accepted to be a real phenomenon. Me, 7-year-old school kid in North London, 1974. Older kids pass on the legend of World War II bunker buried under the playing field. Every so often, kids would take spoons from canteen and try to dig it up. Never got far, always told to fill it in and return spoons. 2009 archaeologists find World War II bunker under school playground. There was an urban legend in the UK about a guy called Purple Aki. The rumor was he was a giant bodybuilder who roams around Liverpool asking young men if he can squeeze their muscles and then asks if he can squat them. I heard it as a London teen years ago and thought it was a hilariously bizarre urban legend from those crazy kids in Liverpool. Then it came out a teenager died after running away from him and accidentally getting hit by a train while trying to get away, and suddenly the real Purple Aki was all over the news. There was a haunted house in West Hobart, Tasmania, Australia, that would slowly send everyone living there crazy over a period. It turned out there was an overgrown water tank in the yard with a hidden datura plant growing above it that would drop flowers onto the tank. The people living there were microdosing a Duralurn. In my hometown, there's a house that was one time used as a safe house for infamous mobster Al Capone. The town is situated along the banks of a fairly large river, and some years after this mob safe house was shut down, a tunnel was discovered underneath it that led to the river, presumably meant to be used as an escape route should the police discover the house while members of the mob were there and needed to get away. It was speculated that there were maybe other tunnels in town, and many of the kids at my high school wondered if there could be tunnels under the school, with the entrances hidden within the building and exits hidden in places just off campus grounds. This was summarily denied and dismissed by faculty and staff and treated as a joke by almost everyone until one was found. The entrance was discovered in the school auditorium beneath the stage, behind one of the walls of the orchestra pit. I went into it once, but took no more than a few steps. Students who explored deeper into the tunnel said they had gone much, much further, likely as a opposite end of campus. They said it looked like the tunnel went further but was blocked off and locked, and they were unable to see if there was an exit that led back above ground. Even after its discovery, the faculty continued to deny the existence of any other tunnels beneath the school, but they could no longer deny that there was at least one. In my town, there was rumors for several years about a serial car artist. Allegedly, some dude would sneak onto people's driveways in the middle of the night and have sex with that car's tailpipe. Last year, the police arrested a dude for sexual misconduct involving a motor vehicle. I mean, I saw something like this on one of those weird shows like My Strange Obsession or something, but I figured the guy was just faking it. This isn't a thing, right? I mean, come on. That's weird. Howard Hughes is the archetypal super-rich hermit, one of the world's richest men. In his later years, he locked himself in a hotel penthouse, never trimmed his nails, and kept his urine in jars. All of these peculiarities were all rumored, but he had a well-paid PR team whose self-interest was to deny these rumors, mostly all true. I live in Lima, Peru, and I heard people talk about a clown that pops up at around 3 a.m. at an intersection. Sure enough, some nights at 3 a.m., there is a clown at the intersection that juggles balls and gives you balloons. Don't ask. In the town that I grew up, there was a creepy little house just on the edge of town, set back a ways in the field but still visible from the main road. Typical rumors that it was haunted, supposedly by a banshee-like spirit, and her shrieking could be heard in the wee hours. It ended up that the banshee was actually some kind of monkey that the owners had as a pet. Because monkeys were not allowed in the state, they kept it a secret. The university I attended in Texas had an urban legend about a student that got lost and died under the maintenance tunnels under the campus. I had always thought it was rumor because many ghost stories were tied to it, until my senior year when I got a part-time job at the university. Turns out there was an extensive tunnel network under the school that fed steam to the buildings for heat. Anyone who goes into those tunnels is required to have someone with them to prevent another death. A corpse found in the funhouse that was being used as a set for the $6 million man. Elmer McCurdy was a thief who was gunned down during a train robbery in Oklahoma in 1911. His body was taken to the coroner's for autopsy, but no one paid for McCurdy's burial. The body was preserved, so the coroners started to charge people to see the mummified remains of McCurdy. His body went on tour, and even showed up in a couple of films. It went missing for a few decades until the 70s. Part of the crew for the $6 million man were removing dummies from a California funhouse. One of the arms of the dummies fell off, and the workers saw bone, and that was how McCurdy's body was found. He's now buried in Guthrie, Oklahoma. They poured cement over his grave, so he can't go on tour again. Starlight tours. There was an urban legend in the Canadian prairies about a man who would kidnap indigenous people, steal their winter clothes, and abandon them in the middle of nowhere to die in minus 30 temperatures. The idea of Starlight tours spread a bit to general non-indigenous populations as well, and I remember people jokingly warning each other at high school house parties to be vigilant if they were going to walk home a fair distance. Turns out Starlight tours were real, and that it was the police who were doing it. The police in Saskatoon would grab indigenous people during the winter months and abandon them on the city outskirts to die. These suspicious deaths would then be documented and covered up by a variety of racist notions. The indigenous communities would insist that it made no sense for someone to be able to walk that far out of the city without a jacket in minus 30, but the police wouldn't investigate and just say, he must have been drunk, as the police were the ones doing it. Too many indigenous people, it was never an urban legend, but instead an open act of violence. Too many non-indigenous communities, people thought it was somewhere between an urban legend or an exaggeration, though I'm sure many knew the truth behind it. At least in Saskatoon, this is confirmed to have started at least by the 1990s and went on until about the 2000s, but the idea of it goes back to the 70s. I'm sure there's more to this outside of Saskatoon, but I don't know specifically. Despite there being convictions for related incidents in the police force, no one was ever actually convicted for the Starlight tours themselves. The same police stations also got in hot water for trying to delete Wikipedia articles about the incident. My university campus has a local urban legend ghost story about one of its oldest department heads. He was a chemistry professor who invented his own concrete. The story goes, when he died, he asked for his body to be encased in the concrete. There's a concrete cube memorial that sits on the steps outside of a building on campus named after him, and his corpse is rumored to be sitting in his wheelchair, forever preserved in the cube. According to a few different art history professors on campus that know a lot about our memorials, the corpse thing isn't true, but they've said the wheelchair made it into the cube. I grew up where there were some signs of Native Americans. I started believing that this one particularly beautiful spot had to be sacred and probably was a burial ground. I'd convinced my friends to hold hands in a circle and try to commune with the dead. After I got a bit older, I was super embarrassed that I'd ever done such things. A few years later, a Native American came and told us how sacred the land was that we owned and asked permission to hold peyote rituals with his tribe and others on our land. To this day, they still come out and set up a teepee and drum all night, absolutely flying on hallucinogenics. Turns out I was right. Wasn't a full-formed urban legend, and don't know if you can count this as true, but my cousin went to a high school that students vaguely always said was haunted or cursed. Mostly dumb stories about things moving or dubious claims that someone's cousin or brother who graduated 12 years ago swears he saw a ghost, combined with catch-all explanations for every time the football team lost or the ceiling sprang a leak. Students used to say the school was built on Native American burial ground, and that was the curse, Seminole Curse. A few years ago, they found out that it wasn't a Native American burial ground, but actually it turns out the school had been built over a cemetery for Black Americans and unidentified bodies, or those who couldn't afford burials elsewhere. Apparently, when the school was built, it was built around the cemetery grounds, but over time, the cemetery was forgotten and the school expanded over where it was. The historian who tracks the records to figure this all out disagrees it was forgotten, which is probably pretty fair since the school was built in like the 50s, not centuries ago. The school, also notably, was a segregated school for white students only when it opened. There was a fake expedition launched to find the wreck of the Titanic, which was actually a cover-up for a classified and sensitive military operation. But by amazing fluke, it did actually find the Titanic. Sort of. What actually happened was the military operation wrapped up early, and the private contractors involved decided to just go looking for the Titanic instead, because they had a rough idea where it was, and it was something they were wanting to do. When I was about 12 years old, a friend and I were playing in the woods that were known for being creepy. While building a fort, a strange man snuck up behind us and yelled at us to get off his land and never come back, yada yada. It really startled us, as we knew the land was a public area and had never been threatened by an adult before. Several years later, we found out he was an actual bank robber wanted by the FBI for years. We were building our fort a few feet from his stash. Here's a news article about it. Wiki page, Carl Kosagian. I remember hearing about Eddie Murphy refusing to take up Bill Cosby's offer to take him on as a protege. Bill wanted to help him become a more well-rounded comedian and get him into legit acting, all the while toning down the profanity and adult-themed jokes. Eddie refused. At the time, it was assumed that was more because Eddie was just completely different than Bill. He was vulgar and Bill wasn't. Simple as that. However, there were rumors that Eddie hung out with Bill a few times and then suddenly they didn't like each other at all. The rumors also indicated that Eddie found out something about Bill that he didn't like, and that's why he separated himself. Bill then started to be less than polite toward Eddie as well. Well, we all know what happened after that. Eddie probably found out about the drugging and the sexual assaults. Now Bill is in and out of prison, and Eddie is making kids' movies. Urban legend from my hometown began in the early 80s, around the same time Friday the 13th was released. Legend was that a swimmer from a local college was dared to swim across a lake that was known to have a larger-than-life snapping turtle. People swore that it was as big as a VW bug. Anyway, halfway across the lake, the turtle supposedly snapped his legs off and he sank to the bottom and drowned. His body was never found. Very few people ever swam in the lake because it truly did have a large snapping turtle population. When the internet rolled around in the late 90s, it was verified that a college student, not a swimmer, did drown in that lake during the 60s, but had nothing to do with the turtle, and his body was recovered. I still never swam in that lake and never will. In WNY, there was a guy who allegedly would roam around bars in the downtown area licking people's shoes for fun. Turns out it was true. Met him outside of a bar, and the dude licked the entire sole of my shoe with his entire tongue. Like the back of his tongue started on the sole of my shoe and licked the entire sole of my shoe, with a fair amount of pressure too.